Hi there, you're listening to the Guitar Speak podcast. My name's Matt Wakeling, and thank you so much for joining me for episode number 144. Now, today I'm talking to John Encarnacao. Now, John's muse runs very deep with a myriad of channels to direct his creative output. He happily steps from rock to free impro and any number of points in between and beyond. Today we talk about the latest Warmer album, Wooden Box with Strings, John's series of guitar solo albums, free impro trio W.E.S.T, and much more. Now, I met John back in 2005 when I started my music degree at the University of Western Sydney. I had such a great time there, such a rich experience, and John was a big part of that. Such an inspiring teacher and musician, a guitarist and academic. John had a project called Saint Crustation, which he mentions in the podcast, and I loved that project so much. When I started my own ambient guitar noise solo impro thing, I named it Saint Jambience, in part to honour John's influence on that kind of gig. So there you go. So it was lots of fun to get John on my show and ask him some questions about his own work. And so let's jump straight into it now. John Encarnacao, welcome to the Guitar Speak podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Mate, this is
nice to see you.
Nice to see you. This is a treat. Now, John, somewhere on your Bandcamp site, you do a good service to us. You sort of divide your works into song-based stuff and improvised-based stuff. I know that's a very binary and arbitrary division, but I'm excited to talk to you today, and I thought we'd divide the conversation into those two kind of broad areas, and then we'll explore what that means within each. So first up, song-based stuff. I was really excited to hear your new Warmer record, which has just been released this year.
The new Warmer record, Wooden Box with Strings. It's the fourth record I've released as Warmer. The background to that is that I did 3 records as Warmer between 2002 and 2011. And then I did several records with the Nature Strip, which is a collaboration with my friend Peter Marley, who was the bass player in Warmer, but began writing some tunes. So the Nature Strip we both write songs for. But Wooden Box with Strings was a bit different because I had the opportunity to go to Hobart and work with this guy called Dave Carter, who produced the record. He taught in some sort of music degree at the Tasmanian Conservatorium, where twice a year he would get an artist to come and do some recording and get his students to engineer it as an assessment. But he would oversee the whole thing. So that's what happened. And what it meant for me was that I was in a place pretty much removed from any musicians I would usually work with. But I was also able to work on the record in a really concentrated way. So it was 5 days in April 2017 and then another 9 days in January 2018. And, it really was like I was living, breathing, eating, sleeping this record. I'd go back to the accommodation after a day's writing and I'd begin writing the string quartet charts and get up, early in the morning to copy them out and then have the session with the string quartet and all that sort of stuff. So it was a really blissful time, actually.
That's so exciting. Did you already have songs written or parts of songs, or was it all done down there?
No. I had I sent them demos.
Uh-huh.
So there were several songs that I'd written over the previous year or two that I thought didn't really suit the Nature Strip. And there were also a few songs that I kind of had in my pocket from the previous decade or so that just hadn't found a home. Got Older Today, actually, we tried to record that for the second Warmer record, The Cat's Meow, but it just didn't come off. What was I going to say about that? Yeah, there are also a couple of songs that would have suited the nature strip, but I just went, I've got to save these for this record
Uh-huh.
because otherwise it's going to be all slow songs.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Let me have a
so Warm
guess.
On were actually, sorry?
Oh, I was going to say, let me guess. Get So High, was that one of those?
Yeah. Yeah, the nature strip, Jess Champer, who I work with a lot,
Yeah.
Jess and Pete were both pretty dirty on me for not giving that to the nature strip. But you know, I needed that balance on the Warmer record.
Yeah, nice. That's such a great tune. That is super cheerful power pop. I loved it.
Thanks. Yeah, I like it too.
Hey, you mentioned writing string arrangements. So there's beautiful strings on 3 of the tunes.
Yeah.
How fun was that writing for strings for this stuff?
Look, it's something I've always really liked doing. And around the turn of the century, like Nick Dalton from Half a Cow, who Half a Cow put the record out
Yeah, yeah.
way back in the mid '90s. He put 2 and 2 together, and he said, "Well, um, you've been to the con. You can probably write for strings. I want some string arrangements." So he invited me to write some string arrangements for something or other on Half a Cow. And then I did quite a bit of it through the late 90s and early 2000s,
Okay.
including some stuff for the Whitlams. And you may remember a heavy band called Sunk Lotto.
Yeah, yeah.
I did some string arrangements for them. Yeah, I probably did a dozen different sessions as an arranger from the mid 90s to about 2002. Before I got the job at Western Sydney University, I actually wondered whether I could make a living doing arrangements, and I tried to pitch myself that way, but there really wasn't that much work.
Sure.
But no, it's a total thrill. I love it. Yeah.
I love the outro of the title track, Wooden Box with Strings, where it gets pretty trippy and noisy and chaotic. But just the parts within the song are beautiful. What's the shredding?
Look, I just want to pick you up on that, because I think that is a moment, that outro to Wooden Box with Strings, where I do kind of reconcile those improvised and pop elements.
Yeah.
So you're familiar with my trio espadrille. We did a record called Tinderbox, which was music for a play, and that was a complete aleatoric score, where it was a set of instructions which really mapped out about 50 minutes of music. And similarly, the chart at the end of Wooden Box with Strings gives the string players instructions rather than notation to keep improvising into the last 30 seconds, 50 seconds of the recording.
Yeah, cool. Nice. And they wherever they took it, that's what you kept.
Yeah. They did rise to the challenge.
Fun times. I like how you've even though there's these different sections of your creative output, I love it how when the stuff seeps from one sector to another.
Yeah, and it probably happens more than I appreciate. I probably think that things are more sort of separated than they actually are. So yeah, you're going to ask me about some shredding. I mean, that's what we're here for, isn't
it? In part. There's a crazy violin solo. I think is at the end of Fisher's Swim.
No, it's Got Older Today.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yep.
There's 2 violin solos in Got Older Today.
Yeah.
That's a woman called Emily Wolfe from Hobart, and I mean, Dave Carter was really important in finding the right people, and I told him what I wanted, which was basically a kind of do you know Bob Dylan's album Desire?
Yeah. Yep.
So it's got this violinist on it called Scarlett Rivera, and she's just playing all the way through it. Probably one of the best examples is Dylan's song Hurricane.
Yeah. Like it
sort of violin solos all the way through it, and that was really the model for Got Older Today. I wanted that kind of folk fiddle kind of thing going on.
That's great. It's very exciting, that part. I love the trem guitar in that tune as well.
Yeah, I almost feel like that's a little too hidden, because I'm really, that was a part I played on my Telecaster, and I just was really proud of that part, but most of it's just buried below the vocal. But I did listen to the instrumental mix recently, and I went, yeah, that's really cool.
Is that amp tremolo, or are you using a pedal?
No, that was amp tremolo. Yeah, and I can't remember what amp it was, to tell you the truth, which is disappointing for all you guys out there.
I think hearing it's the main thing. That's okay. It's beautiful though. It's such a lush. It's in the front of the song too. That's before the vocals start. That's a good spot to isolate it maybe.
Yeah.
How much gear could you take down? Because home's in Sydney. How much gear could you lug?
I just took that one guitar actually, but this leads us to probably something very relevant for this this podcast. Is that when I initially just looking up a document so I can remember what things are, but when Dave invited me down and he heard the demos and he heard the sort of thing I wanted to do, he said, well, we've got a collection of acoustic guitars down here, which was gifted to us by, a serious collector. And he sent me a list of guitars, which was seriously about a page and a half long. It must have been 40 or 50 acoustic guitars. And he said to me, tell me which ones you think you'll use and I'll get them restrung. And I went, look, I'm not that much of a gearhead. Just, maybe just restring 3 or 4 that you think create a contrast, so I can have a few things to choose from. And I've got it written down here because I'm not good with stuff like this. But one was a Gibson Southern Jumbo. And man, I want one. It just felt fantastic straight away. It felt like it enjoyed being played by me. It was like instantly a part of my body. It was just a beautiful thing. So most of the playing, the acoustic playing, because it's mostly an acoustic record, most of the acoustic guitar work on that record is either the Gibson Southern Jumbo or a thing called a Hauro, Hauro, which is a Japanese Martin copy.
Okay.
Which was really beautiful too. But on Fire Engine, the song Fire Engine, I play this 1920s Harmony Sovereign.
Oh, wow.
And I played, I did the guitar and the lead vocal live at the same time. And it just had I didn't know what to expect, but it was not a guitar that had a lot of dynamic range, but it had a very distinct, vulnerable kind of sound, which made for a lot of the character of that track, I think.
Yeah, that tune's got it's got that wonderful acoustic guitar, and then there's these shards of electric guitar in the background. Even not so much background. These big slabs of ambient stuff. That's a cool juxtaposition.
Yeah, look, I was going for a very specific thing there. I was doing my best impersonation of Roland S. Howard.
Okay.
From the Birthday Party.
Yeah.
So he has a way, or had, he's such a distinctive guitar player. It's this combination of reverb, whammy bar. They're the main two, and distortion.
Mm-hmm.
And but it's a real kind of overdriven amp distortion. It's not, pedal distortion. And we just cranked that really, really loud. And I wouldn't presume to say I've reached the heights of Roland, but that was definitely the inspiration for that part.
There's lots of cool guitar tones. It all sounds very organic, but there's a real, if you listen closely, the old cliche that close listening is rewarded. There's a really cool fuzzy guitar in Fisher's Swim. What's going on there?
Fisher's Swim.
It's almost like a counter melody to the vocal.
Yeah, I know the part you mean. I'm just trying to remember what I think. I think that was using a very slow phaser
Okay.
as well as distortion. So it kind of just opens the envelope very very slowly, and it kind of, to me, it's kind of a bit string-like. It's sort of it creates a bridge between the strings on that track and the guitar part, because it sort of speaks almost like a violin to me.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, it's got that really singing kind of quality.
Yeah, yeah. And that reminds me that Dave Carter played some Ebo guitar on Blackboard Sky, which is a not dissimilar tone to that phase tone on Fisher Swim.
Yeah, nice. The end of New Thing, there's a joyfully distorted bass solo. Is that a bass? I thought it might have been a baritone, but I think it's more a bass. That's my guess.
No, it's a bass.
Yeah.
It's a bass guitar. I think Dave just dialed in the effects. I think that was one of those times where I told Dave what I wanted, and I just let him do it.
Yep.
And I just played the thing.
Nice.
But it's funny. It's funny you say that it all sounds very organic. I like to think that too, and I mean, part of that has to do with my conception of the record, and I was very much thinking of the recent records of Laura Marling, folk singer-songwriter, and also one of my heroes, Robin Hitchcock.
Yep.
Who is one of my favorite songwriters of all time, but he's made several acoustic records, which were kind of a model for what I was doing as well. But also, even though the record was recorded digitally, it was mixed old school. So it was mixed using virtually no automation.
Okay.
So every mix was a performance with a couple of hands on faders moving things, so that once you said that's the mix, you had to be pretty sure, because then everything was going to be changed, and that was gone forever.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm just going to go back to that mix and turn the bass up, a dB. No, not possible. You have to start from scratch. I like to think that contributes to the organic feel of the record, that people were actually moving faders in real time.
Very cool. Now, as we speak, it's early October 2020 in Australia. There's some cautious optimism about COVID and the restrictions, but in an ideal world, would you be gigging this record, putting a band together?
Look, I would have definitely at least played a couple of shows. I actually had a couple of shows booked for May and June. I still think that people are quite reluctant to go to gigs, even though, Camelot Django, where I play a lot of my shows, opened up towards the end of July. Most venues are only at half capacity, and even then, they're not necessarily. Sometimes they're selling stuff out, but I talk to a lot of people, even people who are in bands, and they say, "Yeah, I don't really like the idea of going to a venue and being with a bunch of other people."
Yeah.
So I agree with you. Like, when I look at Europe and look at the US, I'm so grateful for where we are, and despite the government here doing a lot of things that I don't agree with in terms of, picking winners in terms of how the economic recovery unfolds. I think that as a nation, we've been fairly sensible. I think there is a nutbag element that is worried about their quote unquote freedoms, but they're not as big not a bigger movement as they are in the US or even in France or Spain or Britain.
Yeah,
Where
absolutely.
so yeah, but still, I don't know if the live scene's ever going to bounce back to what it once was. But look, I did get a new lineup of the band together, and we played a gig in November when I released the first single from the album, which was "Get So High I Can't Get Down," and that was Lloyd Swanton on bass, Jess Champer on drums, Susie Bishop on violin, and Tim Byron on keyboards. And that was really beautiful. And I'd love to play with that group again, but I've been cautious about it's original music, and I play in several bands doing covers. I mean, they're just sort of specialist things that play a couple of times a year rather than hit machines that play several times a week. But yeah, I'm just given it's an original project, even the prospect of trying to get 50 or 100 people in a room, I'm just not sure.
Sure. I guess it's still a bit early days for that, I guess, in terms of Australia. Let's move on to some of your more improvised stuff. I've been really digging the guitar solos series. Can you give me a bit of background of that, and we might work through some of those records?
Yeah, beautiful. Well, I guess I was always interested in improvisation, and even going back to my I had a band in the late 80s called Smelly Tongues, named after the Residents song. We were a trio, and we were kind of a hardcore trio, but we played with, unconventional time signatures and sometimes whole tone scales and things like that. But there were certain songs of ours that had free improvisation in them. I don't even know if I would have called it that at the time. But I knew it wasn't improvisation on a chord progression. And by the mid-90s, I started doing improvisation in a more dedicated way. I had a project, which you're familiar with, called Saint Crustacean.
Yes. A big fan.
And for those at home, it was basically a project where I'd improvise with a tiny Casio, which had a radio in it and a bunch of effects pedals. And I made an album with those resources. It came out in 1996. So I guess improvising on doing sort of free improv on acoustic guitar kind of started around 2005-06 with some music I did with John Drummond, who's an old friend and accomplice. We did a thing called 6 Degrees of Separation for a computer music conference where I was playing acoustic guitar and he was playing electronics. And with that project, I got into the habit of, we only did that a few times. It was sort of like one performance and a couple of rehearsals. But I found that tuning my guitar a different way every time I played it in that mode meant that I couldn't rely on shapes that I knew. It was impossible for me to play an E chord. So it meant that I had to use my ear in a really thoroughgoing, constant way to create, chords and melodies and, combinations of notes that made some sort of sense. It was an interesting challenge for me. So Giraffe Solos was a record that I did in 2014. And a lot of people quite like that record. And again, the guitar's tuned in a tuning that I probably could never find again. I couldn't tell you what it was. It was just that night I sat down and I went, okay, what am I going to do? Tune my guitar to some obscure tuning by ear. So it's in tune with itself, but I wouldn't have even known what the notes were. And actually, the situation with that was I was teaching a class on free improvisation the next day, and I was going to play for the students to sort of model free improvisation to them. And I thought, look, I'll just have a play the night before and get into the mode. And I decided to record what I played on my mobile phone. And I played 5 or 6 pieces that went for about 35 minutes. It's just the play that I felt like having. And listening back to it the next day, I thought, I really like this. So I got in touch with Mitchell Hart at the university, and I said, because I thought it didn't sound too bad, and I said, do you reckon I want to put this out as a record. Can you master it? And he sort of did a few fancy but quite subtle things, splitting some of the frequencies. So he made a mono file into a stereo file, added a little bit of reverb. I had an idea of splitting one of the longer pieces into 2 and restructuring the album like that. And that was Giraffe Solos, 2014, which I'm really proud of that record.
I love it that it was just you sitting at your table, recording on your phone without any agenda, and then you listen back and there's some very honest, I don't know if that's the right word, but very stream of consciousness playing whatever you're playing, and then that becomes the statement rather than the reverse of how so many other records are made.
That's right. It's completely intuitive. I mean, I could invoke the Residents' theory of obscurity. So one of my favorite artists of all time is this anonymous group from the States called the Residents. And they claim to sometimes work with the theory of obscurity. They did this album called Not Available. And according to the story, they did it in 1974. And then their record label put it out in 1978 without telling them. And they were okay with that because they recorded it under the theory of obscurity, which means it's recorded with the intention of no one ever hearing it. Mm-hmm. It's not recorded with any idea that it has an audience at all, which means that any musical result is completely pure and unencumbered by expectations, financial or otherwise. So there you go, theory of obscurity.
Yeah. Love it. Now, I remember a gig I went to I think it was in that year, it was in 2014, which ended up becoming Guitar Solos 4. Was that the next record, or was the Joe Williams record the next in the series?
I think the Joe Williams record came out first. So Joe Williams he was a student. He still is a great guitarist, but I teach at Western Sydney University, and he presented this set of solo guitar work for his final performance, and it just knocked me out. It was reminded me of a guitarist called John Fahey, Fahey. I'm not sure if you're familiar with his work.
Yeah, the American, the blind fingerstyle guy, amongst other things.
Yeah, he's not blind.
Isn't he? Okay.
No. But there was a lot of mythology around him, and his first record he released is Blind Joe Death, because he was trying to fool people into thinking he was an old blues guy.
Okay, that's where I've got the
but he wasn't actually blind.
Wires crossed. Okay.
But anyway, he had a kind of style of taking folk music in a fingerpicked guitar style and getting pretty adventurous with the harmony. He was particularly influenced, I think, by classical music composers like Bartók and Messiaen. So you get these long improvisations on guitar, acoustic guitar by him, based on folk tunes and some original music as well, which just goes way out there. And he also works a bit with tape manipulation. So it's a studio-based practice at times too. And anyway, what Joe Williams was doing, I thought, had resonances of that. I think he said to me he was more interested in Davy Graham, who was another somewhat experimental folk guitarist in the 60s. And anyway, I just said to him, we've got to document this repertoire. Can you can we make a record out of this repertoire? So there was 20 minutes of stuff that he did for the assessment, and he had a couple of other pieces. Some were original, some were arrangements, and we recorded it in a session or two at Western Sydney University, and I put that out on my label, Joe Williams's album Solange. So then when I came to launch Giraffe Solos, I called on him and a couple of other guitar players for a whole evening of guitar solos. So there's myself and Joe, John Hunter, Luke Bizzetto, and Stephanie Anegro. And we recorded that concert. And it took me a couple of years to figure out what to do with it, but eventually it came out. I put it out as a CD called Guitar Solos 4. And why Guitar Solos 4? It's because I saw that kind of experimental guitar playing somewhat in the tradition of a guitarist called Fred Frith. And Fred Frith, if anyone's interested in experimental guitar, no doubt they know Fred Frith's 1974 record Guitar Solos. But if you don't know it, you just won't believe that someone's doing that with a guitar.
Mm-hmm.
It's just mind-blowing stuff. So he did Guitar Solos, and then he did Guitar Solos 2, which was him and the work of 3 other guitarists. And then there was another one called Guitar Solos 3. So I thought that I'd call this one Guitar Solos 4 because I thought it followed in that tradition.
Yeah,
but it was a pretty obscure in-joke that no one else gave a damn about, really.
I had to research it myself. It didn't make sense like Led Zeppelin 4. I thought, hang on, what's going on? I love that record because I was at the gig, and the gig was so wonderful in at 107 Project. So I remember being in there with Josh Isaac, and that was such a great night. And then, but then to hear it back, a few years later on record was really a thrill because not every magical gig you go to gets released. So it was fun to relive that.
And what I really like about that record is how totally different from each other those 5 guitarists are. So Joe does his kind of folkish thing. I do my obscurely tuned, free improv thing. And the other 3 guitarists all use electronics to some degree.
Yeah.
John Hunter, you barely recognise the guitar's a guitar. The other 2 are sort of more a more easily recognisable fusion of guitar and machine. But I put it out, so of course I like it. But
yeah.
I think it's pretty interesting.
Was it Stefan who was recording as well as performing that night?
I can't actually remember. I think he might have been.
Yeah,
I think you're right.
I loved his set too. He had like that full heavy metal axe, but you can't read the book by the cover because it wasn't a metal set, but he had this really pointy guitar, but he started crafting this just beautiful otherworldly stuff through a bunch of machines.
Yeah, I mean, his is kind of almost the most consonant and sort of conventionally pretty music on the CD, I think.
Well, that's an interesting point. We might jump over to talk about W.E.S.T, which when you talk about consonant, W.E.S.T is the collaboration with yourself, Felicity Wilcox, and Lloyd Swanson, and the little bits of recorded output I've heard from you guys. There's some really noisy elements or found sounds on the instruments. And then there are tonal passages, some consonant tonal. That's a really interesting mix of things for me. Can we talk about that project? Because I know you've got a gig coming up with those guys too.
Yeah. W.E.S.T. So W.E.S.T is Felicity Wilcox on piano, myself on guitar, Lloyd Swanton on bass, double bass. And Lloyd, of course, plays, his main gig is the Necks, although he also leads the Catholics and does all sorts of things. But I'd say that the necks were one kind of model for my group espadrille, my improvising trio.
Okay. Yep.
They were also just as indebted to, say, Sun Ra and Art Ensemble of Chicago. But I think that Lloyd, particularly in W.E.S.T, sees the group as an opportunity to explore the double bass as an instrument which can be prepared or played with unorthodox techniques and substances, chopsticks, shopping bags, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So not that he doesn't get into that kind of experimentation with the necks at times, but I think that he probably takes it a bit further with W.E.S.T. Felicity on piano, she's interested in preparing the piano and playing from inside, but she also has a background in songwriting and film composition, and she's quite, I think, influenced by French composers such as Debussy and Eric Satie. So there's a real lyrical, melodic aspect of what she does. And, myself, I have this sort of dual history in free improvisation and rock music. So I can go either way. I've been playing the guitar with chopsticks for a long time to find unusual timbres. But I'll often be one to sort of get into a riff. It probably won't sound like a Deep Purple riff or a Led Zeppelin riff or something, but repeated passage. So between the three of us, any of those elements can come together at any time, I suppose. And the music is completely improvised, just like the Giraffe Solos record and what we used to do with espadrilles. So yeah.
Nice. Are you using any altered tunings, or do you need a bit more familiar territory to work in on the guitar?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually use the guitar in standard tuning, which is the first time for years that I've actually done that with improvised music. It was just an intuitive decision, I think. I think what's worth mentioning is that, and I sort of, in the years following Giraffe Solos, I did a reasonable number of solo improvised shows. And one of the ones I did, I was just playing the acoustic guitar through a DI, and I started getting some feedback through the monitor, the wedge, and I started using it as part of the piece. And after that, I started playing the acoustic guitar. So it's an acoustic guitar with a pickup. I plug it into an amp, usually my Vox AC15. I drive the amp a bit, and I just situate myself so that I can use feedback as part of my expressive language, I guess you might say. So that was a part. That's a part of what I do with W.E.S.T, and to sort of cap off that idea of those guitar solo, series of records, if that's what it is. I mentioned to you in an email, I've got another record coming out early next year called Giraffe Duets and Quartet.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'm playing the acoustic guitar through an amp and using feedback as well as extended techniques. And that's with Brendan Smiley and Holly Harrison and John Drummond. So at the moment, for the last few years, that's been my mode of free improvised guitar is playing through an amplifier and incorporating distortion and feedback, which is, I'm not going to say it's groundbreaking, but I don't actually know anyone else who's doing it. People tend to play electric guitar, and then your whole gamut of effects is available.
Yep.
Or they play acoustic guitar, but somewhere in the middle. I mean, I'm sure there must be other people doing it, but I just don't know who they are.
It's such a stark thing, that acoustic guitar. My hat's been off to you since that first Giraffe Solos gig, because, you know, my practice was always with processing. It always just, I thought, I don't know if brave's maybe not the right word, but the idea of just you and a guitar and maybe some chopsticks or something is, it's pretty stark. So you gotta make it happen all by yourself.
Yeah, and I would agree that it's brave. I mean, there were a few times where it almost felt like too much anxiety. And I think maybe that's why I gravitated towards the amplification, because it's a kind of processing, I suppose. But it's also an interesting way to expand the timbral palette. So, you know, sometimes we're working on a W.E.S.T record, and there are times on that where I can hear that I might be hanging on a note of feedback and turning the volume up and down on my guitar, or bending a string just slowly, and so getting these long modulated notes, you know, which is not something you can do if you're just playing acoustic guitar.
Yeah.
And yet there's a quality to the sound, because it is an acoustic guitar, not an electric guitar, that has its own character, and perhaps talks to the acoustic properties of the double bass and the acoustic piano in W.E.S.T.
So all things being equal, we could be looking at 2 new records next year. Then that's pretty exciting.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I think those 2 will happen, and there'll probably be 3, because the Nature Strip is probably going to make a record over the summer.
Okay,
we're talking about doing an album of power pop covers. That's the fresh scoop.
Nice.
Told any of you media types about that yet?
Wow. Well, thanks for telling me. That's cool. Can you name names?
Look, I guess we're thinking about the DBs, Let's Active, maybe Teenage Fan Club, Wilco. There'll probably be an original or 2 on there, but those sorts of classic power pop artists.
Nice.
Fountains of Wayne, maybe.
John, when I first met you at UWS back then in 2005, I knew we'd get along because I think I'd just been to one of your lectures on Miles Davis, and then I walked past your office and you're blasting out Fountains of Wayne B-sides, and I thought, here's a dude I should get to know.
And then I think we connected on Kiss down the track as well.
That's right, yeah. Well, you introduced me to, what were they called, Wicked Lester? I thought, who's this band?
Such a geek. Even a geek about Kiss. It's ridiculous.
That's great. It's the best. Awesome. Oh, man, John, it's been so fun digging through all this stuff. And I know we're just really scratching at the surface of all the stuff you've done and all your projects. But, it's been super fun digging into some of the details of this stuff.
Oh, it's beautiful talking to you. It's lovely to have the opportunity to talk about relatively full span of what I do. It's a pretty rare opportunity for me.
Oh, cool. That's awesome.
I really appreciate it.
Oh, man, my great thrill and pleasure to do it, really. What's the best way for people to keep up to date with you, what you're doing?
Well, if I was smarter, it'd all be one thing. But I've got 3 Bandcamp pages. There's China Pig Records, which includes the Nature Strip material. My warmer material is at John Fernando at Bandcamp. And Psycho Pajama Bandcamp is where all the improvised music is, the Giraffe solos, the Giraffe solos, Guitar Solos 4 and the Joe Williams record.
Yeah.
So they'd be the main ports of call, and also Half a Cow Records, who put out most of the warmer records. I should have a website with everything in one place. That's a project for the future.
Sure. Well, I'll put there'll be links for all this stuff in the show notes too, so people can chase it up that way. But John, thanks again. It's been great. It's been great asking the questions.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
There you go, John Encarnacao. I really enjoyed that. I love the way John thinks about music and discusses it and engages, and I always find it inspiring. So nice to have that time today. Hey, thank you so much for joining me on the Guitar Speak podcast. If you haven't subscribed to the show yet, you can do that through iTunes or Spotify or Stitcher or wherever you podcast. We have the PayPal tip jar if you want to support the show, and all of our social media and stuff. That's all the links are in our show notes today as well. So if you want to hop over there, you're more than welcome. All right, I'm out of here. My name is Matt Wakeling. You've been listening to the Guitar Speak podcast. I'll catch you next time. Bye now.